So I got into a bit of a Twitter spat today, and I wanted to talk about it a little bit on the video. So this Twitter spat was about gender affirming care and whether or not it's good for trans people. Now I want to give you some context to this. The tweet that this comes from is like not related to gender affirming care at all. Me and this guy just kind of went down the rabbit hole, and that's normal. That kind of happens on Twitter, and Twitter is not a great place for arguments. I think that the text limit horrible, and then of course like it's just online. It's not good. But I'll give you the context. So Victoria here, who I wasn't following until I did the previous take of this video, where in which I have my microphone off for 17 minutes before I realized it was off. I didn't realize I was following her, so I followed her. Okay, so she's responding to a tweet here. Trans women are men, and men cannot breastfeed as they do not lactate. It's physically impossible. Any seepage is not breast milk. The act is both perverted and abusive when performed by men. Okay, so here's the truth. Males and females both have the ability to lactate. That's not specific to females. And with hormones, and I didn't even know this till recently, until Nominal Naomi came about, and she was a big thing on Twitter, and kind of how she got her claim to fame, I guess. I didn't know that like you could induce lactation on men. I knew that it could happen like accidentally because of genetic fuck-ups, but I didn't know that we could actually do that via medical hormones and other medicines like that. I had no idea, and that's actually pretty cool, not gonna lie. Of course, Victoria says this is actually false. People assigned a male at birth have the ability to lactate. True. And then this person, Mr. Right here, who is the main villain of our show today, I'm kidding, says men provided external hormones can lactate. Fix that for you. And he's already coming at this in bad faith, not actually interested in any real conversation. So I come at it with bad faith and not actually interested in any real conversation, but it pretty much turns into an argument. So I said, what's your point? Yeah, men can lactate. So can trans women. So can trans men. So can cis women. Oh, I get it. You're conflating biological sex with gender identity. Understood, little bro. You know, right off the bat, I'm like calling him little bro and shit. You know, I'm having a good time. And then he says, and you seem to not understand that because you're believing you're something doesn't make it so. Just because someone has the mental defect that they believe they are a different sex doesn't make it a reality. Don't coddle the mentally ill, get them help. I said, yeah, and you're conflating gender and sex. You're still conflating gender and sex, sorry. Gender refers to the roles and expectations placed on people on a spectrum of masculine to feminine. All available data proves that transitioning socially or medically, I should have said and or medically, but Twitter's character limit's so small, saves lives of trans people. That is getting them help, not coddling. And of course, I ratioed the fuck out of him with this because, you know, I'm correct. Also, this is a lefty person's tweet, so, you know, they're going to see that. Anyway, so said getting them help. They said getting them help by providing support for delusion. Odd, the highest suicidality rates are after transition. Wonder why. And this, ladies and gentlemen, this is so you know how like what's the hold on. This is the start of the rising action. Hold on. Basic plot chart. Here we go. Okay. So we have the beginning and the exposition, ladies and gentlemen. Can I pull? Give me an actual picture here. You fuck. Okay. This is good. Open image, new tab. Okay. Oh, this is so small. Okay, we'll get it. This is a little bit small. Okay, so guys, this whole time we were right here. But the moment this dude said this, odd, the highest suicidality rates are after transition. Wonder why. We just started. We just went up here, okay, ladies and gentlemen? We're going up the rising action, okay? Oh, geez. So I said, God, you're really uneducated. This comes from the National Library of Medicine. So gender-affirming care results in more positive outcomes for patients. This is the help. So here we go. This goes across 288 U.S.-based transgender adults. They took a survey online. Okay, that's what you need to know. That's why that paragraph is here. Participants were asked if they ever had a history of suicide attempts or thought of suicide as a dichotomous variable before gender-affirming treatment. Prior to initiating unspecified gender-affirming treatment, 73.3% of the sample reported a history of suicidal ideation. Not good. This percentage dropped to 43.4% following the initiation of gender-affirming treatment. Prior to treatment initiation, 35.8% of the sample reported a history of suicide attempts, and 9.4% reported a history of suicide attempts after initiation of gender-affirming treatment. So there you go. The suicidal ideation drops considerably, and suicide attempts drop considerably. And then I also share a picture of how they came to what the actual numbers are and how they kind of what variables were put into that. You can read that on your own if you care. And then he sends me back this study, which is a Swedish study. Long long-term follow-up of transsexual persons undergoing sex reassignment surgery cohort study in Sweden. So we're going to go through this study because he didn't say anything other than just this, right? So we're going to go through this study and we're going to talk about it a little bit, okay? So there's a couple things I want to start with, okay? Well, actually, one thing I want to start with. This setting of this was done from 1973 to 2003, okay? So generally speaking, when I want to do any kind of research, particularly about medicine and medical practices, I try to find research that isn't older than 20 years, unless I'm specifically talking about medical practices of that time and what the common belief was of that time period, then I'll go back for that. But if I want to find the best medical practices for today, I will use something more modern. Generally speaking, and I've had this since 8th grade because my 8th grade English teacher taught me this. She's like, when you guys do research papers, don't do anything under the 20 years, right? And back then we were like, if you get into the 90s, don't do it. Don't use something from the 90s. Get something a little bit more modern, right? And so this is a little bit outdated for me personally to find it useful. However, for the sake of his argument for Mr. Right here, I'm willing to go ahead and say, fine, I'll disregard that. I will say, for this case, I'll let you have that. I personally wouldn't use this, but for you, we'll say you use it, okay? So this study went with 324 sex reassigned persons, 191 male to females, 133 females to males in Sweden from 1973 to 2003. Random population controls 10 to 1 were matched with their birth year and birth sex or reassigned final sex respectively. So they were matched with a control group of cis people, right? Cool. So let's look at the results. I have part of this highlighted. Don't look at that. The overall mortality for sex reassigned persons was higher during the follow-up than for controls of the same birth sex. Keep that in mind. Particularly death from suicide. Sex reassigned persons also had an increased risk for suicide attempts in psychiatric inpatient care. Comparisons with controls matched on reassigned sex yielded similar results. Female to males, but not male to females, had a higher risk criminal convictions than their respective birth sex controls. Conclusion: persons with transsexualism after sex reassignment have considerably higher risk for mortality, suicidal behavior, and psychiatric morbidity than the general population. Our findings suggest that sex reassignment, although alleviating of gender dysphoria, may not suffice as treatment for transsexualism and should inspire improved psychiatric and somatic care after sex reassignment for this patient group. Okay, so let's be clear about something. This study he's citing to me, which he claimed he's using to back the claim that highest suicidality rates are highest after transition, does not say that at all. What this is comparing it to is the suicidality rates from trans people compared to cis people, or the suicide attempt rates from trans people to cis people. Nowhere in this study is it comparing before gender affirming care and after gender affirming care. Okay, nor is it comparing before the follow-up, so when they started getting their gender-affirming care, right? So this isn't talking about anything of what he's claiming. This is not conclusive at all. In fact, the author of this study, Cecilia DeJean, I'm so sorry, I'm going to mispronounce her name, I'm so sorry, says that it's actually alleviating gender dysphoria and that this is a good thing, okay? So I point this out to him, and I say that this is kind of old, it's outdated, right? But this says that, you should get more treatment, right? And then I said, here is another paper from the same author, okay? So I found another paper from the same author. This is a review of literature, okay? The part we're looking at here, although you can read all of this, cool. This is how they got to it, right? Okay, so although many studies were methodologically weak and included people at different stages of transition within the same cohort of patients, overall this review indicates that trans people attending transgender healthcare services appear to have a higher risk of psychiatric morbidity that improves following treatment and thus confirms the vulnerability of this population. So, I have two instances now of the author of this study that he provided me saying that gender-affirming care actually helps people and that their morbidity rates go down following treatment. Two examples of this, and I point this out to him, and somebody blocked me because I said the word retard. And then he literally copied and pasted the part I just read to you, but I can't see it because it was under somebody else's tweet. Kind of silly. He said, a higher risk of psychiatric morbidity that improves the following treatment and thus confirms the vulnerability of this population. And I was like, dude, bro, You literally just copied and pasted the part of it. I said, you're fucking retarded, bro. Yes, trans people have worse mental health. She clearly indicates that they get better following the care. The part you cited literally says, in parentheses, that improves following treatment. Did you fucking read it, LMAO? And then he later, let me go back here, I can find it. He literally says, you didn't read what you posted, and I copied and pasted clown emoji. I said, yes, I know the part you copied and pasted, and it literally says improved following treatment, dude. I'm done talking to you. You're not interested in any real data, only keeping your biases alive. Please grow and change this person. And he told me to learn to read, as if I embarrassed myself. And then I said, what do you think the sentence that improved following treatment means? Please explain that to me. I'm waiting. And he said, read the whole piece, not difficult. So yeah, I did read the whole piece. I did. And it still doesn't prove anything he's saying. And then he says, I go on asking him again, explain this to me, how they got better after getting care when you started this by saying they got worse. And he said, and yet the Swiss study proves exactly what I stated. And it's like, no, it doesn't. It doesn't. So I offered him to come on my show. And he said something, and he called me a liar because I misread his thing here. But I offered him to come on my show. He's definitely not coming on my show. Okay? So that is the main part of the study. I would say the climax of that, guys. What would you guys call the climax? I'm going to say the climax is where, okay, so the rising action, be like, he points out his study. I'm like, hey, man, that's fucking wrong. And then I send him back something by the same author. I'm like, bro, literally says this. And then from there, his falling action is trying to fucking make that work until we get to the resolution where he stops responding to me. So I want to be clear, okay? Now that the fun part's done, now that we're done with the whole looking at the studies, I want to be extra clear, guys. Gender-affirming care helps trans people. It helps them with their depression, helps them with their suicide rates, helps them with suicide attempts, okay? This helps in every way conceivable. Even the author of this study that this guy provided agrees with that statement, okay? It shouldn't be controversial. So I want to be clear. I think that something's happening here with conservatives, and I assume this guy's conservative based on his position on trans people and the American flag and Israeli flag, Jesus, and Star of David in his bio. I'm going to go and say this guy's probably conservative. Or, you know what I mean? He's probably conservative. But I think something's happening here because what we should be doing and what we should be talking about when it comes to trans people and gender-affirming care is, well, how can we get the best outcomes for the most amount of people? And all the data indicates that the best outcomes for the most amount of people, trans people, is gender-affirming care. Undoubtedly, this is the best outcome for those people. It helps them, undoubtedly. Okay, that is what the current science indicates. If that changes in the future, I'll say, I'm sorry, I was wrong. But as of right now, it does not indicate that. Okay, so we need to work towards things that give us the best outcomes, because the worst outcomes are people killing themselves. Okay? So I think something shifted in the conservative brain. They don't care about getting the best outcomes for these people. And this is either because they are ignorant of the actual outcomes of gender-affirming care, and they've been lied to. Or maybe they've been lied to, that's two. They've been lied to by the media they watch, the people they associate with. Or three, they don't care at all. They're genuinely evil people who just want to see trans people dead, or they just want them to no longer be in public life because they get an icky feeling about them. Now, this is scary. This is bad. This is not good. It's a whole group of people. Although it makes up less than 1% of the population, it's still really bad. And we don't want to see a group of people die like that, especially when we know it can be prevented, right? We know that. We have the data to prove it. So when you guys are arguing with people online, you gotta be able to figure out if that person is coming at you from a genuine, like, how do we get the best outcomes? Or are they just going to start throwing out talking points that they've been told over and over and over again, okay? Because here's the thing. We all agree that trans people exist. Every conservative and every liberal agrees, yeah, trans people are real. There are some people whose gender identity doesn't align with their sex. Conservative people wouldn't say it that way. They'd say, oh, they're just confused and they're delusional. And, whatever. They think that they're the other sex. And that's not correct. But, okay, we all agree that these people exist, right? And then we disagree on how to solve it. But here's the thing. Conservatives do not want to solve it. They don't. They think that, like, conversion therapy would work. And it's like, no, we actually have data on that too. Conversion therapy does not work. It doesn't help trans people, okay? So you got to be able to, when you're talking to people like this, you got to be able to snuff out whether or not they are actually invested in having a good positive outcome. Because I think if someone really genuinely cares about people killing themselves, and they should if you're a human with any kind of a moral compass, then they'll end up agreeing with you. Like, yeah, you know what, I was wrong about the data. And there are ways to kind of rhetorically get people to that position. But people like this guy, Mr. Right 143, Israeli flag, American flag, and Star of David, this guy, although he loves dogs and that's adorable, he has no interest in having better outcomes for trans people. None. Absolutely zero. Okay? So, Mr. Wright, if you're watching this, because I'm definitely linking this to you either in DMs if I follow you or in this tweet thread here. If you're watching this still to this point, I hope that you change. I hope that you come to recognize that what you're doing here and your logic does not make sense, but also results in more people killing themselves. I'm not saying you're directly doing it. I'm not saying that. But the message that you're pushing is that of one that leads to suicide. And that's not good. I would hope that in your heart you say, well, I don't want people to kill themselves. That's horrible. Because I think that like every human has a moral compass. And I know that online things get kind of heated. And I know that things you can kind of hide behind the veil. But it takes some massive balls to say, you know what? I was incorrect. And I can't tell you how many times I've had to sit and say to myself, I'm incorrect. Here, Mr. Wright, if you're still watching at this point, I used to be a conservative. I grew up conservative, okay? My whole family, maybe a couple members are conservative, okay? And I switched my beliefs slowly through a process of years, maybe starting in like 2019, going into 2021, where it became more progressive. And even now, it's still shifting. I would actually say I'm shifting a little bit back toward the center, but not like crazy centrist, but I'm still a liberal and still a progressive. But my point is like, I have had to have massive shifts in my character to get to where I'm at. I've had to sit with myself and go, hold on a minute. Does this make sense? Am I correct about this? And it takes a lot. It breaks your ego down a little bit to just like admit that you were wrong about everything that you thought of, or at least about particular issues. Like, because when it comes to guns, I'm still like pro 2A. I love guns. Guns are cool as shit. You know, I love them. But in other positions, I've really had to radically change. Like my abortion position, radically changed since I was a teenager, right? My positions on the economy, radically changed. Trans people, radically changed. Because I talked to people, I debated people who I considered to be pretty good friends at the time, and we had really good conversations. And oftentimes, when you're having a debate with somebody, things are heated, things get kind of aggressive sometimes. But then when you go and you think about it later, if you are a person of good moral conscience, you will go, okay, where did I go wrong there? What are things I could have said better? If not for any reason other than to later prove your points better, right? And sometimes you realize you're just wrong. Maybe you should look into it more. And maybe you should ask yourself, am I wrong? Have I been wrong about this? And maybe after that, where did I get my information from? Who told me this? Who's been telling me these things? If I am wrong, should I drop those people? The answer is yes, you should. They're lying to you. But, you know, don't listen to me. Do it yourself. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I post on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and I'll see you guys all in the next video. Bye-bye.